Hi guys, welcome back to week 4 of Gouache Bootcamp. I am excited to be finishing up this camp with you. I have to start off by saying I apologize for sounding a little bit congested today. I caught COVID for the first time last week and it's hit me kind of hard. I still haven't gotten back my sense of smell yet, but I'm at least feeling capable of talking and getting out of bed and getting dressed. So hopefully I'll have the energy to finish the lesson today. I'm sure I will. But if I'm a little bit lackluster, that's probably why. But I didn't want to put off your final week of boot camp. I wanted you to be able to finish strong during the month of January if you wanted to. But I'm excited for this lesson. We're finishing off today with painting paper, which it sounds kind of like an odd texture to paint, but I find that we can use it in so many different ways. If you've seen the I love you notes that I have painted a lot of, people just seem to really love those, and there's something so fun about painting the folded paper and the shadows and the way it falls on the paper. And I think you're really going to enjoy this and probably find some fun ways to utilize it within your own paintings. So let's go ahead and get started. Because I don't anticipate that your underdrawing is going to take particularly long today, you can go ahead and wet your paints now just so that they have a little bit more time to get ready for you to start painting. To begin sketching out our underdrawing, I'm just going to start by kind of blocking in the major placement of the paper really lightly, just so that it gives me a little bit more of a reference of where I'm going, and then I can get more specific with it because obviously it has a lot of different small details and shapes to it. But I need to think about the placement of my paper in comparison to the shadow. One of the great things about these paper paintings is that the shadow is it can play such a fun part of this painting. And really, I feel like it's the shadow that it just adds so much dimension. It really brings these paintings to life and grounds the painting, makes it look, more realistic. So if you're going to be wanting to paint some of your own paintings of paper at home, I would recommend, as you're taking your reference photos, to really think about, I often say this, think about a nice strong cast shadow, because that's really, a strong cast shadow is often going to be your good friend in something like this. It's just going to give you a lot to work with, and I think it'll actually just end up paying off a lot for you. So let's see. I think I've probably got the basic shape of that. Okay, now also when drawing paper, because it's going to be, predominantly light grays and whites, I might not want to go, especially on the inside of it, quite as dark as I would with my lines on other pieces. That's just something to think about. So I'm going to start with thinking about the shape. As I've gotten this kind of basically segmented out, I'm going to start thinking about the shape that this bottom part makes before I move on to the top part, just so I have a reference of which to go off of. So, and I'm really thinking about, one of the things that is going to make this interesting is thinking about the tear of this paper. We will have some fun kind of focusing on that the edge of that. And so think about the texture that that's making and how that's not going to be a hard line. It's going to be kind of, it's got some squiggle to it. And we're also going to see that amplified in the shadow where those, you know, the torn edges of those paper is. So just really kind of inch along, pay some close attention to the shapes that torn edge is making, because it's going to kind of help define your drawing once you get into the drawing. Something interesting that I want you to think about is the angles that this paper is going. Because it's folded kind of in an accordion, we're gonna have like some angles that it's going. So this fold right here, the paper is angling up, and so I want to accentuate that directionality of the paper there. And then because it's going to be going this direction on this side, I'm gonna have to accentuate that on that side. I think I'm going to have it come in even a little bit more. You'll see this is why I didn't draw, you know, too dark of lines at the beginning there when I was just kind of barely sketching, you know, where it was going to be. All right, I'm also gonna slightly sketch in really lightly where I see a bit of a fold right there, bit of a fold right here, just kind of so it gives me some reference when I'm beginning to paint. Okay, so something interesting, I think, obviously this is on an angle here, but this one is also going to be a little bit more of an angle. So it's going to be angled like this, but even a little bit more that direction. Now, one of the most interesting parts, I think, of this for the drawing, at least, well, for the painting too, is going to be this torn edge that came, you know, out of the spiral bound notebook. And so, so when I get to that, I'm going to start with actually thinking, where do the circle parts that I see, where are those circular shapes? And then I'm going to end up filling in the rest of the shapes around those shapes. As you guys are taking this course from me, you're probably seeing how non-precise I am in a lot of my underdrawings. It's funny because I think, to me, it's more important that like the basic like gestalt of the thing is true, and if it's not exactly how I see it, that's okay, as long as it like feels like it reads true to me. So if that makes any sense. Sometimes I'll go through and try to make things, you know, a bit more perfect and exactly how I see in the reference photo. And sometimes I'm like, nope, that's just good enough like that. You know, it doesn't have to be 100% exactly the same as the reference photo. And that's going to be entirely up to you and your, like, that's going to be your opinion on how precise you want your drawings to be. I feel like that's kind of one of those stylistic choices that you get to make on your own. All right. So now that I've got the basic shape of my paper, I can move on to the more precise shape of the shadow. And we get to have this fun cast shadow down here. There's going to be, let's see, this one is going to have a little bit of a shadow. But then down here we get this fun cast shadow. And one of the cool things about cast shadows like this, especially when it's kind of elongated, with a really strong shadow like that, is that it'll, you know, stretch a little bit. And I think that's really fun with these, with this kind of paper. Now it's going to be, I don't expect you to draw like every little tiny fleck of where the paper tears are. You're going to just get like the basic shape of it down, because we will go in with the with paint and really accentuate those. So something interesting is this part of the shadow comes right up to the point of the paper, because this is kind of like the fulcrum of where it's resting. And so all of the rest of the shadow kind of goes up from wherever it's, you know, touching, clearly wherever it's touching the table, it's not going to have as much of a cast shadow. And then the further up it is, the longer that shadow becomes. And you really get to, you know, play around with and accentuate the shape of it, which is fun. And then I'm also lightly going to draw in the lines. And what I want you to think about too on those lines is really thinking about those angles that it's taking. So, and I wouldn't draw these too dark, but like it's going to go up there and then it's going to go down there. And then it's going to go up again. And then up again. And it's fun because these lines are also going to add, kind of like when we were working on the fabric lesson, these lines are going to help give dimension to this paper. There's kind of, at this fold right here, you can see the paper kind of bows a slight little bit, and that's going to just kind of give, there'll be just like almost like a little, it'll go into a little bit of a V there. and then up. And last one. This one's kind of fun because we've got a little bit of a crease right here. So it's kind of following that crease a little bit. And then we've got this red line, or pinkish line, I guess, really. And then I am going to lightly sketch in the call me. You can choose to include that if you want to or not. That's entirely up to you. I think it's fun, but let's see. And it's fine if it looks more like your handwriting than mine. Obviously, that's what's going to make yours seem more like yours. One of the fun things about including the text is going to be that the color of it's going to change where it moves from shadow to light. So we can have a little bit of fun with that. All right, and like I said, that was the nice thing about this reference is it just doesn't take too much time. If you feel like you want to put a little bit more effort, spend a little bit of more time on yours, obviously that's wonderful. But we will go ahead and move on to the painting. As I often do, I'm starting with the background and the shadow. And because this is a lot of ground to cover, I'm going to be using a bigger brush. So I'll start with an 8 filbert. And then I can just get a nice even wash all over that background. As I was finishing up the background, I did want to bop on and say to notice on this final circle, the shadow there, you are going to have a little bit of the lighter turquoise poking through, and then it will have the shadow there. As we move on to the shadow, I just wanted to point out that one of the lovely things about working with colors that you use frequently, like I love to use, I love to use this background turquoise teal color. And one of the great things about that is I'm already going to have a color that is very close to the shadow color because I use that so frequently. So I'm using this color that I already have mixed up that's a little bit of blue, a little bit of teal, a little bit of black, kind of all mixed together. I might add a little bit more of this kind of bluish color down here at the bottom for my shadow. And it's going to be a little bit darker on this side, and then over here where the light is shining from, I will make this slightly more teal colored shadow just so that it has a bit of dimension. But you guys, once you start adding this shadow down, it's fun because this is when this paper really starts to kind of have that trompe l'oeil effect. and really feel like it's starting to lift off the page, which is one of the fun things that can happen with these paper paintings. And really with any of the paintings where you get that nice strong shadow, you get that fun trompe-l'oeil effect, which I love. So the edges of this shadow are a little, they're quite sharp, you'll see in the reference photo. And what I mean by sharp is that the edges are very defined. Those little fibers that you see of paper sticking off the original paper are quite well defined. So I'm going to let you choose whether you want to soften the edge of this shadow or not. I often like to have it a bit softer, even if in the reference photo it appears pretty sharp, just because I feel like it's going to accentuate the difference between the shadow and the actual paper itself. And I just like having that, you know, a little bit of kind of juxtaposition, or just that little difference to kind of let you know that it's a shadow as opposed to something solid. But I'll look forward to seeing what choices you end up making in your own painting, whether or not you choose to keep that edge of that shadow really sharp, or whether you choose to soften it some. Okay, so as I move this direction with my shadow, I am going to just slightly blend it into a little bit more of a turquoise color, like a turquoise gray. So, and that I might have gotten even a little too light right there, but so you'll see that there's kind of like a difference between this side of the shadow where it's a little lighter and this side where it's a little darker. And we're going to go back in when we're like at the very end, and we're going to put in the little fibers and edges of the paper that you see on the actual paper. So don't worry about that right now as you're going up to the edge with the shadow. We will come back in and we will add those at the end. You are going to be needing a pretty small brush to get into these circles for the shadow. I probably should have used something even smaller than this. You just want to make sure that you have enough control. All right. So as you can see in the shadow, those fun little fibers that are kind of coming off, I am going to add some of those right now. I'm not going to overdo it, but I am going to add some of them. And kind of just make sure that your brush is like pointed in a nice sharp edge, and you can kind of just almost tap them on. And you can be as precise as you want with those. I think we're just being basically we're with this part of the shadow um, giving the effect that the paper is torn. Okay, so I decided for mine I do want to soften that edge. So I'm going to come in with a 0 filbert, and like I do when I soften the edge, I'm just getting the paintbrush wet, and then kind of sometimes I use my fingers and sort of just get off some of the excess water so it doesn't drip. And then I'm just going to come along the edge and I'm just going to soften it lightly. Just because I want that shadow to really feel just slightly different from the paper. Even going to come in on these fiber parts, lightly softening them. If you end up feeling like your brush is picking up a lot of pigment, you can go back in and you can rinse your brush and re-wet it. Just always remembering when you're coming back in not to have your brush too wet, because it will, puddle. You're just wanting it damp. And you can see how already, once just adding that shadow there, before we've even done any of the shading on our paper, how much it already feels like that has quite a bit of dimension and is really sitting there on the paper. Moving on to beginning to add color to the paper and also shadow to the paper, I still want to have a fairly big brush. I'm going to use a 6 filbert. And I have a container of kind of off-white. It's not yellow. I also have a yellowish off-white. I'll show you the difference in these two tubs. So you can see they're close to the same value. This one is very warm and this one is more cool. And I made it by adding some grays and light blues to white. But when I use it on, I'm going to use it on this part, which is slightly shadowed. It's going to still read as white, but it's just going to have, a hint of shadow there. And I'm just painting right over the line work. I'm painting right over the writing. And I think, looking at it, that I want it to be even a little darker gray. I want it to be a little darker right here where this kind of fold is, this fold, and then along this edge. So I've got another just kind of grayish, it's really just, gray, mixed. I might want to put a slight bit of blue in there. Maybe I'll actually use this. So I've got this kind of grayish, bluish mixed. I often think that the shadows on paper do read quite blue. And that's fun because if you add some blue to it, it's just going to add, a bit of color to your painting. Especially with shadows with grays and stuff, you really do have the ability to add some color to that. It doesn't have to be boring. It can seem a little weird, like when you're first doing it. You can be like, oh my gosh, that has so much blue in it. But once you add it, you'll realize, oh, it's actually not as much. It doesn't read so blue. It still will read gray. So you'll see that I kind of added a little bit of that dark to the edge there and then to this edge, and then I just kind of went in and blended that. And then we've got this part where the paper is kind of bending up there, and it's got that little bit of a fold on it. That part is going to be the lightest, kind of like the lightest that we see over here. And then this one where it folds, so the paper goes up and then accordions down and then kind of folds like this and then comes back up on this side. This one's going to be our darkest shadowed one. So I am going to again use that kind of blue gray that I had on my palette for that darkest section. Really kind of drawing a straight line where the fold is, just to really accentuate that fold. And then I think I'm gonna bring in some of this lighter color so it just kind of almost fades down. And you'll see I'm going over that writing, so I might lose some of it, but it's still possible that some of it will show through once it's dry, especially since it's under kind of a white. And I'm going to come back in with some of the lighter gray mixed with just a little bit of this darker kind of bluish gray. We've got this little fold here that I'm going to accentuate. And you'll see, I want you to pay attention to these little, nubbins of paper where where they tore out, and you're going to notice they're not going to be the same colors because they're going to fall a little bit different in the shadow. I really want you to pay attention to where is it that you see the shadow on those pieces of paper. Like this one that I'm working on now has a shadow that comes down like this, and then we're going to put a darker shadow right there. I had to do a kind of abrupt edit right there. My kitty, who shares my studio with me, decided it was a perfect time to start eating her lunch. So there was a lot of loud crunching going on in the background. So sorry about that cut. We'll move on. So I am, even though I left these white and they're basically going to be white, I don't want to just leave it, paper. I do want to go in and paint that. So I'm going to come in with, oh god, I rinse my brush a little better. Come in with my my tub of white and load my brush up, and I'm going to I get a nice sharp edge there on that fold, and I'll just get good coverage over that area. You'll notice at the bottom of this piece where the paper tore, we've got a fun little effect where it thinned out the paper a bit more through there so that you can kind of see through the paper to the color of the table beneath. And so we are going to add a little bit of like almost a turquoisey shadow right there to give that effect that the paper is torn and thinner there in that spot. But we want to get just some nice white coverage over this before we move on to that. And as you can see, or I think you can see, the lettering is still showing through where we painted, and that's why because it was such a light color that we were working with, we didn't get full solid coverage there, and that's why you want to be careful with your underdrawing when you're working with things that will be reading as white. And I'm going to kind of blend this a little bit up at the top here, just so it's not quite so harsh. And we'll do the white again over here. Oopsie, got a little bit more there. Thinking about getting a nice strong fold line. Okay, we're gonna blend this a little bit because it's obviously too dark. We can soften that up. But I think it's starting to look like it has some nice folds. I think I'm going to lighten this a little bit here. Okay, so now I want to go in and add that kind of turquoisey shadow along this whole ripped edge here. So I think I don't want to overdo it. So I want my brush to be pretty dry as I pick up. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of kind of a turquoisey gray color. And we're going to stipple it on, kind of like how we stippled our orange skin. It's almost, oh, I'm going to get some, I had too much on there. So I just kind of want, oh, still too much. I think that might be too dark, so I'm gonna lighten that up a little bit. I am going to add some of this lighter gray to this. Okay, now I'm going to dry off my brush, get it nice and dry, and then just a teeny little bit of that. Try that again. Okay, there we go. And you can see it kind of starts looking like that part of the paper is sort of see-through, which is exactly what we want. same color I'm going to use over here. And then a teeny bit darker of it for along here. All right. I forgot to add that darker shadow right there, so I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a little bit of that darker shadow. I'm going to kind of mix like a bluish, grayish. And I'm also seeing that some of that shadow is happening kind of along some of the edges of those perforated or those torn edges. I'm gonna brush that off. I want to make this shadow just a little darker along this part of the crease. And also along this part right here. Gonna kind of blend that a little bit. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. I think I'll start working on the lines. So they're kind of a fun turquoisey blue color. I think I will use, I think I'll use kind of this turquoise that I might mix with some of this blue just to make it a little lighter. And I want to get a really thin, so this is a number 1 round, and just going to kind of mix those. And you just want the most fine tip and hardly anything on your brush, because you're just going to lightly follow those lines that you created, just with the most delicate touch. You're just kind of barely suggesting those lines. You just really want to be not heavy-handed with drawing these lines. And you can see after, like, I only loaded my brush once there, how much I still got out of that. I'm going to load it again, but make sure it's just the tip of it. And really, you know, a tiny bit goes a long way because you're just barely dragging any of that. Get a little bit more on there. All right, look, it's starting to look like a piece of paper. It's so cute. All right, I'm gonna add the next step, we're going to do this reddish line right there. It's kind of a pinkish red. So I'm going to use, I think I'm going to darken this color just a little bit. I'll probably add, you know, a little bit of this kind of raspberry color to it. And I just need the teeniest little bit, again, just on the very, very tip of my brush. Hardly anything. What we don't want to have happen is we don't want to load a lot on the brush, because then when you put it down on your paper, you might get kind of like a puddle, and you just want to have just such control over it. You just want such a small amount. There we go. Okay, now moving on to the text, the writing. For the part that's in the deepest shadow here, I'm going to use like kind of a darker red, maybe mixed with a little bit of that, but I might even make it darker than that. I might pull out this and go with an even darker red. You can mix it with like even a slight bit of brown, just to kind of, we want to make sure it reads as in shadow. Again, I'm going to use my tiny little #1 round, and basically I'm just going to paint that on. It can be a little tricky, like, because you want the mark making to look pretty cohesive. You want it to look like it's the same width. So you might have to come back in a little bit. It might not all happen in one stroke, and that's totally fine. I'm sure if you're a calligrapher, this part is going to come a little bit more naturally to you. I am not a calligrapher, so I can't do it in just like a stroke. It takes a little bit of work. And I'm paying attention to this first part, this stroke of the L is going to be wider than the downstroke. Or actually, I guess that was the upstroke and this is the downstroke. But you'll notice it's a little thinner on that side. And I'm kind of wanting to, I'm wanting to duplicate, I'm wanting to copy what shapes, really look at what shapes the pen made. Sometimes if you're painting pen, where the pen is put down on the paper first, like its first mark before you start writing, there'll be like a little bit more ink that shows up there, so it'll be like slightly darker. And usually also like at the downstroke of something, it'll be a little darker too because you've like turned around. So you can kind of notice the intricacies that of the colors that the pen makes. You can, you know, pay as much attention to that as possible. Okay, and I'm just following with this where it's in shadow, just to where that fold goes. Okay, and then I get to use a little bit lighter color red because I want it to feel like it's, you can kind of tell in the reference photo. It might not be as apparent as I want to try to make it in our painting. And this is your preference here too, however you want to do it. But I want it to be a little bit brighter red where it's not in shadow, or is not in as much shadow. So I'm going to use a lighter color red there. And I just think that's fun how it looks like it's picking up, the red is picking up a bit more of the light. All right. Okay, we're still going to stick with this really thin, fine-tipped brush. We're almost done with this. This was a pretty quick one. And there's a few things I want you to notice over here on these little ripped edges. You're going to come in with a kind of a grayish, bluish, darker color shadow. So I'm going to use like this sort of bluish color that I have. Again, you're just putting a teeny little bit on your brush. Not much. And I just want you to notice that the edge that is on the side where the shadow is cast, we're going to get a little bit of a shadow there. So we're getting a shadow here. We're getting a shadow here. 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 And then on the opposite side, we're going to get a highlight. So we can bring our white over and we can accentuate now that highlight. And there's going to be a few other little highlights that we're going to accentuate as well. You'll notice along the edge of the paper, there's kind of a fun little highlight that's happening. It's just these tiny little details that are gonna kind of make it pop the most. And you can go through and accentuate all those highlights. And also accentuate the edge of the paper along the whole thing where it's kind of catching the light. Even this part where it's shadowed, the rest of it is catching the light. And I'm going to go along this edge a little bit. And maybe this one, I just want to make sure that feels nice and sharp along there. Okay, and then we get to come at the end, which is really fun, and we get to add some of these kind of frayed edges. So same tiny little brush, and you're just going to come in and you're going to kind of just, you don't want to add it everywhere because you don't want to overdo it, and I'm going to, on this part right here where it's in the shadow, I don't want to use pure white there, so I am going to add a little bit of shadow. rinse that off so I can go back to my white. I might add a few little tiny hints of white in there. And these just little tiny frayed edges are just like the tiny little details that just really make paper, like torn paper like this, really pop. It's just so much fun. And you just want to wait till the end. It's kind of like when we add highlights to things. It's like the part that you're looking forward to often the most is the thing you kind of have to wait till the very end for. That's probably a lesson that we could all learn in life too, maybe. But the patience pays off. Okay, I don't totally love my lettering on this. I might go through and just kind of come in with my shadowed color and just sort of clean it up a little bit. Like this L feels kind of sloppy, so I'm going to come in and try to kind of clean it up a little bit. All right. There we go. I really hope you've enjoyed the last 4 weeks in boot camp and that some of this information you can go on and really utilize in your own art. I'm excited to see what you create. Thank you so much for joining me in this endeavor. It's been really fun getting to share some of my favorite things about gouache with you. Feel free, you can always reach out to me anytime you want. You can reach out on Instagram, you can send me an email, and I'll try to respond as quickly as I can. But it's been really wonderful having you again this year in boot camp, and keep your eye out. I'll hopefully be offering a new, smaller lesson each month if you want to keep expanding your repertoire in gouache. And I hope that you love gouache as much as I do.